Hi, Jennifer. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey Peter, hey Jennifer.
Hi, Cindy.
Hi, Sandy.
All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone to the Hyperledger Cacti Maintainers meeting. Please abide by the NT Trust policy that we have. It's shared on the screen. And also the LFD Centralized Trust Code of Conduct, which you can find linked to on the agenda document. So, with that said, I had just one update to give to the maintainers. Just that we finally put together the quarterly report for Q4. And yesterday afternoon, I submitted it to the TAC. So they will be reviewing it and then we should be good. So that's all I had. Does anyone else have any other topics to discuss?
Rama asked me to go through the Kotlin implementation today.
Okay, Jennifer, please take it away.
Okay, let me share my screen.
Actually, just before that, real quick. So Jennifer, Sandeep responded to your comments on Corda. I think
Yes.
were those helpful?
Yeah, so I understand that it was implemented that way, and that's fine. It was just really difficult to debug because I had switched over from one testing system to another testing system where where there was initially tokens in the account and more tokens were added, and so it made it harder to figure out where the issue was. So if you have a lot of people that are going to be using the tokens, I think you should address the issue to make them, because the fabric tokens you could it didn't matter how many were in the source account and how many were in the destination account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. I haven't had a chance to look at the Google Doc you wrote, but I assume you've mentioned this there.
So no, this is the, ooh, you mean well, that's okay because I'm going to go through it now.
Okay.
So let's go through here. All right, so hopefully everyone can see that. So we'll go back to the beginning. Okay, so before I get through get into the code, I just want to go through some of the thought process in the design because it's maybe not what you were expecting. And even before that, just so that I wanted to flag some pre-existing asymmetries in the implementations in the different DLTs. This one's not a big deal. It's fine. But this one I've had more. I'm not sure this is the right way to do it, and I'll get into why that is in a bit. So what I'm suggesting really through all this is really more of a change in the in how the COPM is implemented in the contracts themselves. And also as just a FYI, it was not easy to get going on this project because of the large test networks and the lack of automation in the network setup. Because there's a lot going on, as I think I've said before. Also, there's the SDKs that are there. They mix configuration and usage, so it makes for it makes for quite big SDK calls. I've never seen anything like that. And the other thing that was difficult was some of the configuration was hidden. It didn't actually have a footprint in the SDK, and you have to talk directly to the chain code, which is mentioned in the docs, but it's kind of not really called out. So I think that's something that could be improved.
Sorry,
So
what's an example of that, Jennifer? The hidden configuration?
the verification policy and the access control. The Fabric CLI talks directly to the chain code and that's all kind of bundled in one general configuration. So it's just that, and then in the documentation, there isn't very much about that.
Yeah, I think the Fabric CLI as you've discussed is basically it's an ad hoc mess. So yeah. The verification policy was, I mean, it's meant to be a dynamic thing. Like it's meant to be something that you can change instance to instance. So that's why, it's part of the interop. It was part of the interop flow API.
Yeah. So this is just to show you what I mean on the difference between configuration and usage. And this is all to go into, well, why did I set it up the way it is? It's like, well, this is the interop flow method of the interop helper. And it has 14 parameters, not including these. So all of this parameter list is 14 long. And I used to work with some people that were in the Ruby language, and they treated it like a religion. But in the Ruby language, you're not supposed to have more than 4 parameters in a method. So to see something with 14 was a bit of a shock. So the idea was to go and simplify the complexity. So 2 things I thought that could be done were to encapsulate the distributed ledger and to make more of an effort to separate configuration from usage. With the idea was that once you do this, you can go and take your codes some other spot. It makes it easier to implement for other DLTs. So we've got a transaction context, which is supplied by a factory interface, and that takes care of setting up the configuration data behind the scenes, and which makes endpoints and other infrastructure more portable. So the local transaction so for a local transaction, you go off and the context factory, you say who you are. In this case, the source is a source account. And we just invoke the contract and the commands that we want. So, and that in that context and invoke is the same whether it's a local or a remote command. So here we just say, we'll get the context. I'm this person at this organization, this user, and I want to talk to this remote network, and here's what I want to do. So this assumes that this is all possible. Behind the scenes, the environment is able to map the key and the user ID to the ledger network settings, the private search in the wallet or the Corda party in the RPC, and the local relay settings. And it assumes that the environment is able to map the remote organization key to all of the information that you need to talk to it. One of the things that the implementation also has to do is determine the format of the cross-network data sharing commands, for instance, the get pledge status. And I'll talk about this a little bit later because they vary depending on the network type and the asset type, which I think could be improved. So some things I was thinking as I was going through the Weaver implementation, the one thing I thought was puzzling was the view address encoding. So the arguments are encoded to a flat string with a colon separator. So I can foresee that that's going to cause problems if you are passing arguments with complex types. So maybe not protobuf is appropriate, but I wondered, well, why not just use JSON instead of a flat string? And also, like I mentioned before, the way that claiming a pledge is set up is really tough because you need to know the pledge status on the other network based on, and the command for that varies based on the network type and whether or not, basically whether or not it's a fungible or non-fungible or some other implementation. So it adds some entanglement, and it seems like a good opportunity to just set up since this is a primitive anyway, to push this logic down further into the chain code. In general, the division between the example and reusable implementation I thought was a bit fuzzy because in the fabric, you need to implement your own COPM chain code per asset. Also, there's no tooling for interop chain code rule setup and management for access control and verification policy. And in the COPM server really needs to know too much about the asset implementations. It's yet more configuration in this server because in the fabric implementation, you need to know the name of the chain code asset with the idea that somebody somewhere is going to write some contracts that implement these functions. And in Corda, you need to know the chain code commands for the asset. So because of the claim asset command takes some flow parameters to understand what to do later. Those are being supplied by the COPM server. And I think this is maybe the wrong place for this. And so the easy win, if I were to suggest a redesign, would be that the asset type registration happen in the chain code in both Fabric and Corda, so that we want to define the minimum behavior of COPM compatible assets, similar to how the Corda implementation is done, specify the interface abstraction, and add the ability to register the implementations with the interop contract. So then, and you can set up an interop type name that's common between the systems that then maps to the local type so that you can have some flexibility on how you're setting up the tokens. So that pushes the logic down from the COPM server and presents the DLT and agnostic API from the interop contract. Now, the easy win number 2 would be configuration tools. So a good place for that would be a REST API on the relay so that you don't necessarily need to write the web UI yourself, but just have a nice little, you could only supply the most basic web UI to set this up so that when somebody is setting up a Weaver, this is all to make it easier for someone to use this nice software that you've gone and written. Because it makes this configuration more tangible and it makes it clear that you have to do this when you're going and setting up a system. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, the web UI definitely makes sense. The thing is, we never had much time to think about it because,
Mm-hmm.
to be very honest, we were actively working on feature sets until about 2 years ago for various business purposes, and every time we had to do something, we had to quite rapidly spin up new kind of features, and in order to fulfill some kind of a business or a client scenario, and we kept doing that. And over the past, I would say 1.5 to 2 years, we've actually internally had our focus shifted, so we haven't even had the bandwidth to do much apart from maintenance. So that's the excuse in a sense. Everything you've said, I really appreciate it. This is a very good suggestion. Some of them I think, and I can get back to you on that next week. We did, at least I thought about them, but it wasn't straightforward, or rather I thought something couldn't happen. So like the pushing the like doing the asset type registration, there are issues with that. It's the thing. What we want to do, what we wanted to achieve with this with the software is we wanted to provide something that would work for a legacy contract that's managing legacy assets, as well as for new contracts managing new assets. So if you have a legacy contract that's already deployed, how do you do that? At that point, you can't really force it to do an asset type registration, but there's something we can probably think of as another vector of interoperability. This makes sense. I have to think a bit more about the implications for its usage in production, though. So yeah, what you say it makes a lot of sense. I mean, this is, I think, we have this mode where you can. I forget. I have to actually. It's been a while since I looked at the chain code, but I think yeah, we try to make it such that the interop chain code would like in the sample chain codes, you have particular functions, right, for asset locking, etc. So those were
the instructions for bringing the fabric. So say you have a fabric asset and you want to make it COPM compatible, you have to write a whole different set, or rather what you have to do is you have to write your own functions to which, and then the functions that you're supposed to write are described in the documentation. I think that's too fragile. You know, and it's hard. It's much easier to just give somebody an interface and say, look, here's the interface, here's a testing tool to make so that you can make sure it conforms. Go at it. And that's much easier than saying, okay, implement what's in the document. So once you've got that, there's no reason that you can't register it with the interface, so that suddenly COPM doesn't, or rather the server that I wrote doesn't need to know these things. It can just talk to one stable interface.
That makes a lot of sense. I think at some point we did consider something like this. I don't remember now why we went with the way we did. Maybe it was just an expedient way of doing it. But yeah, what do you think does make sense?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So moving on. Yeah, so let me just, to start it, let's go and have a look at the
sorry, Jennifer, real quick, do you like how much time will this take? I'm just asking because I have another meeting in 40 minutes and I had to do a bit of writing before before that meeting.
Yes,
So
well, you asked me to present how
I know, and I hope that I wouldn't have anything else right now. I'm just wondering if this will take a bit of time. Do you mind if we do this tomorrow?
sure.
At same time should work for me. I think we can spend a good amount of time, and I'll also probably get a chance to think about your comments before that.
Okay. Well, I guess there isn't too much. I was going to just go through the open API spec and then go and talk in general
Right.
about the code, but I don't know. Maybe we can just get into it more.
Yeah, I think you asked about what you should focus on the remainder of the of this of the internship or the mentorship. I think a good chunk of time we can just spend probably brainstorming on the issues you've raised and trying to figure out and chalking out various designs.
Yeah.
You don't have to implement them, of course, but we can maybe can start on one or two things which are simple and just leave it at a place where somebody else can take them up. But yeah, I think maybe that's the best use of the remainder of your time.
Okay.
Yeah, let me see if there's anything small, anything else that is really small that you can do. But otherwise, I think yeah, let's do this.
Yeah. Okay. I can. That won't take that much time to just put together a concrete proposal. The other things I have to do or rather, I think I really ought to get around to the issue that was opened, requesting Cacti style one-line command testing. That's from Peter. And so that means going through, I think would be a good idea to make the make files more idempotent. And one thing that was neat, I didn't realize back when I was doing all the make files, the way I did the network setup was I did it just like what was in the CI. And that's using the pre-existing make files. And I want to do that as much as possible because to sort of avoid the flowering of setup code. But one thing that's really neat is that I just learned recently you can make Docker Compose of Docker Compose files. So that could be a better solution for bringing these networks up and down.
Okay, so this is the Docker Compose that combines the, let's say, fabric test network and the relays and the drivers and all.
Yes,
right?
exactly. So
Okay.
you've got like a master Docker Compose for, and
Right.
that will help people that need to do their own testing, like whoever comes along after me and wants to work on this.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
That's good.
yeah. So that'll take some time. I don't know how much I'll be able to do on the Bezier complement implementation, but another thing that sort of I also might not get too much time for this is I think there's a lot to be gained. I know that CI time is sort of a thorn in the project side, and I think there are things that you can do to reduce the overall CI time. So because the Lerna has some really powerful stuff for figuring out what's actually changed. I know when on my branches, when I push, a whole bunch of things run, and they don't necessarily need to. And also experimenting with the dev container-based images instead of always building from scratch. So you use a pipeline that passes along a built dev container, because one thing that I think is inefficient is that the later test jobs will need to do some rebuilding, about 3 minutes of rebuilding per test. And if you just passed along the dev container, you wouldn't need to do that. But then you would lose some time downloading, but it might not be too bad. So yeah, so maybe I just wanted to bring these up as possible things I could be working on.
Yep, sounds good to me. Sandeep, you have any thoughts?
No, not right now.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we can discuss and then get back to you. If you have any other thoughts, we'll get back to you tomorrow and also next week. Yeah.
Okay.
And let's have those discussions.
Okay, sounds
For
good.
tomorrow, yeah, thank you. So for tomorrow, does the same time work for you, or
Yep.
can I schedule it half an hour earlier? Would that be too early for you?
Yeah, half an hour earlier would be fine.
Okay, let me do that because that'll be 7 p.m. Sandeep's and my time, and yeah, later than that on Friday evening doesn't sound good. I'll send you an invite. I think Peter, Mikhail, do you guys want to join, or should I just put Jennifer and Sandeep in it?
I think I'm good, thank you. I have a training tomorrow. It's a 6-hour-long training session, so most likely we'll be covered by that.
Okay. Is it possible for you to add a meeting invite so it gets recorded automatically. Otherwise, what I can do is I can just start a team meeting.
Yeah, I think anyone can add the meeting invite to the calendar, and then
Okay, I can do that. Okay.
yeah. You should have permission. If you don't, then Rai can give you. But also, just let me know if that doesn't work.
Okay, I'll try that. I mean, worst case, I'll start my own team meeting and send a recording.
Okay.
Okay, Jennifer, that was it for me for now. Sorry, I couldn't go through the demo and the other things today.
Okay.
But yeah, I have something within about 40 minutes from now.
Sure.
Okay, let's resume to order.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Any other discussion topics before we close?
Nothing from me. Thanks.
No worries. Sandeep.
No.
All right. Then thanks everyone for joining. Thanks, Jennifer, for the presentation. And I'll talk to you next time.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
See you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.